Ruth Maria and welcome to SC Global News. From a record-breaking 17,800 people said to be baptized in the Catholic Church in France this Easter to the release of an 83-year-old British missionary and his aide in Cameroon, we have many stories to cover. This Easter, a record-breaking 17,800 people will be baptized into Catholic Church in France, the highest number ever recorded by the Bishops' Conference in over 2 decades. The surge is driven largely by young people, with 7,400 adolescents and significant portion of young adults making up the majority of catechumens. Church leaders see the rise not as a passing trend but as a hopeful sign of renewed spiritual awakening in the country where religious practice has long been in decline.
Around 17,800 people will be baptized into the Catholic Church this Easter in France. This is the highest figure ever since the Bishops' Conference of France started recording the number of catechumens more than 20 years ago. Notably, 7,400 adolescent catechumens aged 11 to 17 will become Catholic, a sharp increase of 33% compared to last year. Among the soon-to-be baptized adults, the 18 to 25-year-old group made up of students and young professionals represent 42% of catechumens. The trend that was already noted in last year's study is continuing and growing, with the majority of catechumens being young people. In 10 years, the number of adult baptisms in France has also increased by a whopping 160%. Monsignor Olivier de Germay, Archbishop of Lyon, asserted that the influx of catechumens was not a passing phenomenon and that the significant numbers must be interpreted as a sign from heaven. Since 2022, dioceses across France have also seen a substantial increase in baptized Catholics returning to the church after ceasing to practice the faith for several reasons. Remarkably, in 2024, more than 9,000 adults received the sacrament of confirmation at Pentecost. Catholicism in France dates back to the 2nd century and has shaped its culture, society, and politics. However, in the present day, although 60% of the population identify as Catholic, only 15% are practicing the faith and a mere 4.5% attend Mass each week. Once known as the eldest daughter of the Catholic Church, France is now among the top 5 most atheist countries in the world.
The Catholic Church of the Christ the King, located in the town of Phalam within the Diocese of Hakka in northwestern Chin State, Myanmar, has been destroyed by airstrikes carried out by the Burmese army. According to Agency Affairs, the bombing devastated the church's roof and interior, although the outer walls remain standing. Another church has been reduced to rubble in Myanmar as airstrikes by the Burmese army continue to target Catholic churches. On April 8, the Catholic Church of the Christ the King in Phalam, located in Diocese of Hakka in Chin State, was hit and severely damaged during military operations. According to Agency Affairs, the bombing devastated the church's roof and interior, although the outer wall remains standing. The church had only recently been built to serve a growing Catholic community of around 1,000 faithful, replacing a small chapel that had stood for 75 years. It was officially consecrated in November 2023. The attack occurred during the ongoing clashes over control of Phalam between the Burmese army, which currently holds the town, and the Chinland Defense Force, a local militia that has been resisting the military junta for the past 9 months. This is not an isolated incident. In February 2024, the Burmese military launched an airstrike on the Sacred Heart Catholic Church in Mindat, also located in Chin State. That church was said to become the cathedral of the newly established Diocese of Mindat, which was declared by Pope Francis on January 25th of this year. The destruction of churches in Chin State has been widespread since the military coup. According to the Human Rights Organization of Chin State, at least 107 religious buildings, including 67 churches, were destroyed in 2021 alone as a result of military airstrikes during the ongoing civil conflict. An Irish army chaplain has publicly forgiven the teenage boy who brutally attacked him in a knife assault motivated by radical Islamic ideology. Father Paul Murphy was stabbed 7 times by then 16-year-old outside Renmore Barracks in Galloway in August 2024. In a powerful moment during court proceedings, the priest offered his forgiveness to the now 17-year-old, who tearfully apologized as the two later embraced outside the courtroom.
An Irish army chaplain who was repeatedly stabbed by a teenager radicalized by the so-called Islamic State last August has forgiven his attacker. Father Paul Murphy was stabbed by an unnamed 16-year-old boy on August 15, 2024 as he was returning to his home at Renmore Barracks in Galway. The priest was reportedly stabbed 7 times, primarily on his hands. Despite shouts and warning shots, the teen continued his attack, clinging to the window of Father Murphy's car and only stopped when he was physically restrained by soldiers. The teenager was charged with the attempted murder of an army chaplain in the Republic of Ireland. After his arrest, he admitted to the attack, stating that he did it as a protest against the Irish Defence Force's involvement in Mali and all the stuff for Islam. Father Murphy appeared at the Central Criminal Court on Thursday to deliver his victim impact statement. As he read aloud, the priest turned to the now 17-year-old and said he was in the business of forgiveness, offering him a chance at redemption, saying, quote, "I offer the young man standing accused before me the forgiveness that will hopefully help him become a better person," end quote. He also expressed hope that the boy would have another 80 years of living on this earth. Overcome with emotion, the teenager interrupted the priest, shouting, "I'm sorry." The teen, whose parents are separated, was found to have been radicalized by the Islamic State terrorist organization. A search of his home uncovered graphic videos of beheadings, other acts of extreme violence, and an Islamic State flag in his bedroom, evidence of a radicalized Islamist mindset. Father Paul Murphy studied at St. John's College in the Diocese of Waterford and Lismore and was ordained at the Cathedral of the Most Holy Trinity in 1996. He assumed his chaplaincy post in Galway at the end of 2013 and has since been based at St. Patrick's Garrison Church in Renmore Barracks. Speaking of the attack, he said he was best placed to take the knife, having worked in first aid and ambulance services for over 40 years, served as a priest for nearly 29 years, and spent more than 11 years in the army. He further added, quote, "I thank God every single day that the knife tore through my skin and not the body of one of my comrades. I consider it an honor and a privilege to carry those scars until my dying day," end quote. Father Murphy, who is deeply respected at the barracks and described as an exceptional chaplain and a hands-on padre, was later seen embracing his attacker outside the courtroom. The teen sentencing is scheduled for Tuesday, April 29th.
The world's tallest cross will remain in place in the Valley of the Fallen, as it will not be subject to the government's proposed resignification process. The association representing the site emphasized that any government action within the basilica, whether involving construction, exhumations, inspections, or events, requires the authorization or consent of the appropriate authority. The world's tallest cross, located in Spain's Valley of the Fallen, will remain unchanged despite the Spanish government's proposed plans to redefine the site, according to a statement by the Spanish Bishops' Conference. Standing at 492 feet, the monumental cross is part of a vast memorial complex approximately 30 miles from Madrid. The Valley of the Fallen was inaugurated in 1959 after more than a decade of construction and serves as a memorial to those who died during the Spanish Civil War. The site includes an underground basilica carved into a mountain and a Benedictine monastery, a school, a Stations of the Cross pathway, and the monumental cross itself. Between 33,000 and 50,000 individuals from both the sides of the conflict are buried here. However, the monument has long been a source of controversy due to its association with General Francisco Franco, who ordered the construction in 1940. Franco himself was buried there until his remains were exhumed in 2019 to prevent the site from becoming a place of veneration. According to Bishop Francisco Cesar Gracia Magan, the Spanish government initially proposed deconstructing the basilica and removing the Benedictine community from the site. The plan was reportedly communicated to Cardinal Pietro Parolin during Spanish President Pedro Sanchez's meeting with Pope Francis on October 11, 2024. Since 2007, the Spanish government, under Prime Minister José Luis Rodríguez Zapatero of the Spanish Socialist Workers' Party, has introduced a series of initiatives aimed at redefining the significance of the Valley of the Fallen. These efforts were driven by criticism from left-wing parties who view the site as a symbol of Franco's dictatorship. The push to re-signify the site intensified after 2018 when Pedro Sanchez became Prime Minister. His administration formed in coalition with leftist, separatist, and other controversial politicians political groups has continued to promote changes to how the site is interpreted and used. The government's resignification project aims to provide a new critical and informed perspective on the history of the country. The intention is to transform the Valley of Fallen into a space dedicated to education, culture, and democratic values. In response, the association representing the site released a statement emphasizing that the basilica possesses an inviolable character as established by the agreements between the Holy See and Spain in 1979. The statement described the government's plan as form of desecration, asserting that the ecclesiastical authorities must act to preserve the valley's integrity as a sacred place dedicated to peace and reconciliation among the Spaniards. Furthermore, the association stressed that any governmental intervention within the basilica, whether related to construction, exhumations, inspections, or events, requires authorization or at least the consent of the appropriate ecclesiastical authority, typically the abbot or the local bishop, in accordance with the canon law.
In a historic first, the deaf Catholic community gathered for a nationwide Eucharistic Congress from April 4th to 6th at the Basilica for the National Shrine of St. Elizabeth and Satan in Emmitsburg, Maryland. The event drew over 230 participants from 25 US states and 2 countries, creating a sacred space where deaf and hard of hearing Catholics could celebrate the Eucharist in a way that resonated with their lived experience.
The first ever Deaf Eucharistic Congress was held from April 4th to 6th at the Basilica of the National Shrine of St. Elizabeth and Satan in Emmitsburg, Maryland. More than 230 people from 25 states and 2 countries attended this historic event. Father Michael Depsick, an oblate of St. Francis de Sales and chaplain for deaf ministry in the Archdiocese of Baltimore, chaired the event. He shared that the idea for a Deaf Eucharistic Congress was inspired 2 years ago by a fellow deaf friend who asked about the possibility of such a gathering for those who are deaf and hard of hearing. Janine Atkins, widely known as the Deaf Catholic Mom on YouTube, and Deacon Patrick Grable, one of the very few deaf deacons in the world, were the featured speakers. Both emphasized the central importance of the Eucharist in their presentations. Baltimore Auxiliary Bishop Bruce A. Lewandowski gave the closing presentation. In his final remarks, he shared that he encountered the presence of Jesus in the Eucharist and in those attending the Congress. Father Depsick organized the Deaf Eucharistic Congress with the dual aim of drawing attention to the deaf Catholic community and creating a sustainable budget for deaf ministries. Historically, deaf and hard of hearing Catholics have often felt alienated from the Church and distant from the liturgy. However, this Congress provided an opportunity for attendees to celebrate the Eucharist in ways that were familiar, meaningful, and deeply personal to them.
In Cameroon, a 83-year-old British missionary and his aide from the Mill Hill missionaries were kidnapped by an armed group on April 1st in the town of Bambui. The abduction occurred while they were traveling to a nearby community where they were involved in a project to build classrooms for the underprivileged children. After 48 hours in captivity, the missionaries were released and have safely returned to their mission house in Bamenda.
An 83-year-old British missionary and his aide have been released nearly 48 hours after being kidnapped by an armed group in Cameroon's volatile northwest region. The Catholic Mill Hill missionaries confirmed that Brother Hub Welters and his assistant Henry Kang were brutally taken on April 1st in the town of Bambui. The pair were en route to a humanitarian project in the nearby community of Ilong, where they were working on the construction of classrooms for underprivileged children. Both men were safely released on April 3rd and have since returned to the Mill Hill house in Bamenda. In a statement, the Mill Hill missionaries expressed deep concern over the incident, noting Brother Welter's unwavering commitment to the people of Cameroon. They further stated that Brother Welters chose to stay because his heart simply wouldn't allow him to walk away from those in need, and now his kindness, his sacrifice, his love have been met with violence and suffering. According to African Conscience, an NGO contacted by AFP following the abduction, separatist separatist fighters are suspected to be behind the kidnapping. Kidnappings and violence have become widespread in Cameroon's northwest and southwest regions, which are largely populated by the country's English-speaking minority. These areas have been plagued by the ongoing conflict since late 2016, when President Paul Biya, who has ruled the country for over 40 years without significant political opposition, cracked down on peaceful protests by Anglophone communities. According to the Human Rights Watch, since the conflict began, clashes between government forces and separatist groups have resulted in the deaths of at least 6,000 civilians.
That's all for today. Until we meet again, God bless and thank you.